INEOS are pledging to return Manchester United to the promised land, to bring back an elite performance culture and take United out of the shadows, back to the top table we've not sat at for over a decade as a club. But can United fans really trust them? We're going to explore INEOS' ownership of Nice in more detail to find out what really went on when Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS took them over in 2019. We'll look at their successes at Nice, the mistakes they made, and the lessons Brailsford learned by conducting his audit there. Let's find out more about exactly what we can expect to happen at United over these next few months under INEOS. What are they going to do? In the summer of 2019, INEOS completed the deal to acquire French team Nice in Ligue. And in his first statement as owner, this is what Jim Ratcliffe said. We have looked at a lot of clubs in the manner we look at businesses in INEOS for value and potential, and Nice fulfills that criteria. With some sensible, measured investment, we want to establish Nice as a team that competes in European club competition on a regular basis, and importantly, sustain it. And there were some changes to the staff immediately. Jim Ratcliffe's brother, Bob, was installed as CEO, replacing Julien Fournier. But Fournier was not removed from the club. He actually became the director of football at Nice after being removed as a CEO. And the reaction in France from the fan base was largely positive, but filled with trepidation because of what had been going on with INEOS and their involvement in Lausanne, a Swiss team from the Super League who was bought by INEOS 2 years before, and in their first season at the club were relegated to the second tier in Switzerland. Jim Ratcliffe at the time assured Nice fans that they had made some mistakes at Lausanne, but they were fast learners. These have been rectified and we are already seeing the benefits. And these weren't empty words, because Lausanne were actually promoted back into the top division after just 2 seasons. But it's fair to say the start didn't go so well for INEOS at Nice. They lost 7 out of their first 10 games under INEOS, but they did go on to finish 5th, 2 places higher than they did the previous year because the season was cut short due to COVID-19. But it's fair to say that results for Nice under INEOS were massively inconsistent. They finished 5th, then 9th, then 5th, then 9th again. Much like Manchester United under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Nice were seemingly sort of alternating between fantastic unbeaten runs and then just chaos unfolding on the pitch. And there was no consistency to it. And the fact that Nice reached the League Cup final in France in 2022, but then the following season were knocked out by a 3rd-tier French team, it just sums up how inconsistent they were. But what signings did Nice make when Ratcliffe came in? Ratcliffe pulled the checkbook out quickly, and Nice went on to spend nearly 50 million signing 5 players: Kasper Dolberg, Alexis Claude Maurice, Stanley Nsoki, Hisham Boudaoui, and Kefrem Thuram. And the most successful of those would undoubtedly be Thuram now, who is a vital cog in this Nice team, alongside Jean-Claire Todibo, that is currently in the top 3 in Ligue in this season. But as you know, football teams are pretty reflective of what's going on above them. And at Nice, there's been a carousel of managers, of staff changes, and it's all been reflected on the pitch. And Nice captain Dante spoke about that sort of merry-go-round of movement and how unhelpful it is. He said, "We lost 10 players, 10 arrived. The teams in the semi-finals of big competitions played together for 3 or 4 years. We changed everything last summer." There is a lack of coherence somewhere. I'm sorry to say that. Those comments there from Dante came 12 months after Nice lost in the League Cup final, and was followed by a very important moment of the INEOS ownership of Nice, the Dave Brailsford audit. Dave Brailsford arrived at Nice in the summer of spring 2022 to conduct an audit on behalf of INEOS, find out what was working at the club and what wasn't working. And one thing he was shocked to find was that Julien Fournier, the man who was removed from CEO and made the director of football, was effectively in control of all departments. He was doing it all, which begs the question, what was Bob Ratcliffe doing, who of course was installed by Jim, his brother, as the CEO of Nice? Now, Brailsford's audit ended up dragging on for a little bit longer than anybody expected, because there was a fallout between the manager Christophe Galtier and Julien Fournier, and it was a bit of an indicator of the change that was coming next. Because Brailsford's audit led to the sacking of Jim Ratcliffe's brother Bob as CEO, to the sacking of Julien Fournier, and if it wasn't for Christophe Galtier being headhunted by PSG, he may well have also been sacked. Brailsford was ruthless in getting rid of what he didn't think was working at Nice. In their place, Lucien Favre was brought in as manager, and former Crystal Palace director Ian Moody was brought in to help with the recruitment that summer, and that was something that Brailsford ended up getting involved in, which was definitely a mistake, but something that he felt he needed to do given the short time frame, and they couldn't really get the plans in place properly. And this led to Nice having a bit of a strange policy in that summer transfer window. They signed the likes of Ross Barkley, Aaron Ramsey, Kasper Schmeichel, Nicolas Pepe on loan, players who were deemed not good enough for the Premier League, all went to Nice. Lo and behold, it didn't work out. And the big question that was asked about Brailsford, rightly, was that if Brailsford was doing his audit properly to bring in a director of football, why did he then end up relying on a personal contact in Ian Moody and bringing him in as director of football rather than somebody who was fit and proper to do it? That was a criticism that was thrown at Brailsford at the time. And speaking just a month after the first window following that Brailsford audit, this is what Nice's president, Jean-Pierre Rivert, said. We said we would change the project, we would structure the club, we wanted a sporting director. We weren't going to take someone in the middle of the transfer window. The candidates we were targeting weren't available. We want the best, we were taking our time. We may lose months that are detrimental to the immediate results, but they won't be detrimental to the future of the club. And 2 days prior to that statement from the president, Nice had appointed a new CEO, 39-year-old Fabrice Boquet, who had spent 5 years at RC Lens as their CEO. And sure enough, 15 days later, 37-year-old Florent Gisolfi was announced as the new director of football. And Gisolfi was somebody who had built a bit of a reputation for himself as somebody who was the mastermind behind the rise of Lens. After Gisolfi was appointed director of football in 2019, Lens gained promotion to Ligue 1, where they went on to secure back-to-back 7th place finishes. Gisolfi left Lens for Nice just 2 months into the start of the 22-23 season, but because of everything that he left behind, Lens went on to have an incredible season, and they finished in 2nd place behind PSG. Nice had now acted on Brailsford's findings. They've got a new CEO, they've got a new director of football, and they now have the structure in place to attack as a new version of Nice. And Gisolfi started by bringing in some players to the team. In the first transfer window after his appointment, Gisolfi secured the transfers of Moffi from Lorient, who would go on to score 9 goals, and Ndayishimi from Istanbul, who alongside Jean-Claire Todibo and Kefren Turam have arguably been the best signings of the INEOS era at Nice. And at the end of the 22-23 season, Nice decided to move on from Didier Degarde, who had been promoted from the B team manager after Lucien Favre was sacked in January. They needed a new manager. Where did they turn? They brought in 34-year-old Francesco Farioli. And Gisolfi said that he was appointed because he perfectly matched the vision that he had for Nice. Our analysis of the teams he has managed, as well as many discussions with Francesco about the playing style that he wants to implement, were what guided our decision. Possession, aggression, with and without the ball, the ability to defend high up the pitch, forward passing, getting numbers into the box. He moulds his teams with the intensity that we're looking for, and he'll be able to count on our performance department's expertise to serve that aim. Under Farioli this season, Nice have been flying. With Todibo, with Thuram, they have been as high as top of the league, and they are definitely vying for a Champions League spot. INEOS had done what they had set out to achieve. They had turned Nice into Champions League contenders for those spots in the league. And it's certainly a massive improvement on where they were a few years ago. And all the mistakes that Nice made and all the lessons that they learned from the Brailsford audit, the people that they put in and implemented, from a new CEO to a new sporting director to a new manager, and how all of that aligned helped transform Nice under INEOS to what they are now. And those rocky years for INEOS at Nice, they serve as a bit of a lesson. It's good for United, it's bad for Nice, but they've made mistakes there that they won't make at Manchester United. And we've already seen from the early steps from Ratcliffe and INEOS just how they're going to approach things differently. When INEOS purchased Nice, in Ratcliffe's first statement, he said that they were looking for teams that offered value. That's not been involved in anything that Ratcliffe has said about Manchester United. He's made it clear in a statement to the Manchester United Supporters Trust that they aren't looking to make money directly. They make their money in chemicals. Of course, a billionaire wants to make money, but when the focus is success and trophies, money will follow. The Glazers didn't think like that, and Ratcliffe is not thinking like that. And that's a very big U-turn from how openly he admitted that INEOS looked at Nice as a value investment. And when it comes to the staff, that's where we can see the starkest contrast immediately. Because at Nice, Bob Ratcliffe was made CEO by Jim Ratcliffe. They kept on the old CEO as sporting director. And both of those were big mistakes that cost Nice a couple of years before they eventually got it right after Brailsford's audit. And they installed Bouquet as the CEO. They had Ghisolfi as a sporting director. And then they got Farioli, that triumvirate. That works at Nice now. But it took them a couple of years to find that. At Manchester United, we've already got Omar Barada in as the CEO before Ratcliffe's even been ratified. We are going to get a director of football, whether that's Dan Ashworth or somebody else. And whether it's Ten Hag or whether it's decided that another manager is required, INEOS will not be making those same mistakes that they made at Nice in the early stages. And that is definitely a massive lesson learned. But what other changes can we expect to see from INEOS at Manchester United? First things first, expect more departures, staff cuts. We've seen Robin Sadler, he's going to be leaving as the head physio. I imagine there's going to be an overwhelming gutting of the recruitment department, but also in the overall staffing of Manchester United. I think Man United have got north of 1,100 employees at Old Trafford, and that is a massive overhead. So Brailsford not only is going to install a sort of a sporting excellence performance and concept and culture, it's also going to be applied to the actual football operations, making sure United have got the right amount of staff, not bloat. Trim the fat, if you want to call it that. That's going to be the approach to staff cuts, to the recruitment department. Now, Ghisolfi came in as a sporting director, made some cracking signings at Nice, and then they got Farioli in to be the manager that installed the vision that they had in their heads. Whether that's going to be Ashworth coming in and maybe Mitchell in as a head of recruitment, United have got to get our recruitment right. And again, they learn lessons at Nice and they'll be applying those to Manchester United. You can't compare everything from Nice because United are one of the 5 biggest clubs in the world. Things are on a different level and scale. But they definitely learned some lessons that I think will benefit United in the short term and therefore the long term. And on top of that, there's going to be a massive sweeping out of a culture of complacency that has rotten United.
Well, in our world, you wouldn't work with them. I wouldn't work with them. I'd support them and be very, very, not unpleasant or unkind or everything else, but it's not going to work. That's the, you have to have that commitment and that drive, and that's got to be there. If that's not there, then don't go past square one, really.
Players are so comfortable, staff are so comfortable, everybody is just comfortable with the paycheck and not earning it. That's going to completely change. And eventually, we're going to be getting towards Dave Brailsford's concept of marginal gains.
The whole idea of marginal gains really start to think, right, okay, so we're a pretty long way off up there, but so what can we do? What can we believe in? How do we get some momentum? How do we get some contagious enthusiasm? Of course, people like a little bit of progression, and if we just aim for perfection is so far away that there's no point aiming for, because we're going to fail every day. So I thought, well, let's have a little progression, just a little bit of progression, and that'll make you feel good, So let's identify where we're going. Are we doing the basics? Right, then what could we do by next week that we're not doing this week? What little things could we do?
At the very beginning, it's all about the big changes. But once all those big changes are done, the marginal gains can come in and getting the 1% here, the 1% there. And when you combine those two things, all the massive changes, the big structural ones that we're talking about now, with progressive continual change through marginal gains, that's when you can start to really change the whole trajectory of your football club. Not only where you are now, but where you want to be in 5 years' time, which is the big plan, to win it all again. And when you really think about all the change that is coming at Manchester United, we're not just talking about a director of football or a new CEO or a new head of recruitment or a new head physio or a new stadium or a new Carrington or new players or probably new coaches as well. There's so much change coming. And it's an exciting time, but a very daunting time. And although INEOS have definitely made some mistakes at Nice, they have shown a hunger to learn and improve. We've already seen differences from how INEOS operated at Nice. We've got the CEO, we're going to get a director of appointment very swiftly, decisively. They know what they want the best in class, and we've got Omar Barada, and fingers crossed we can get the best in class in every other area as well. And probably the most important lesson of all is that INEOS have learned that you have to let the football experts make the footballing decisions. The audit will show Dave Brailsford everything that's wrong with the club, but past that point, responsibility will be handed down to Omar Barada, who will be the man tasked with leading the vision for this new Manchester United under INEOS. Will it be any different to what we've seen in the last 10 years? Well, I suppose we're about to find out. But I hope this video has shown you all the mistakes that INEOS made at Nice, all the lessons that they learned, how they've applied that at United already, and why I'm optimistic for the future, and why I think you have grounds to be too. Even if you have some trepidation about INEOS, I'm looking forward to it.